can turn it around and have a look at the writing that's been hiding underneath.
So no one's seen that writing for 4,000 or 5,000 years?
Yeah, the only person that's seen it previously is the one who wrote it.
What if the story of human civilization didn't unfold the way we've always believed? In the ancient lands of Mesopotamia, a civilization appeared with startling suddenness and left behind thousands of clay tablets filled with writing, myths, science, and mystery. Now, advanced AI systems like Grok AI are decoding these long-lost records faster than ever before. And what's emerging from those translations is raising serious questions, not just about history, but about human origins, ancient knowledge, and how much of the past will we truly understand. The sudden emergence of Sumer, a civilization that shouldn't exist. The rise of the Sumerians remains one of the most puzzling events in human history. Around 6,000 years ago, in the region between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, modern-day Iraq, something extraordinary happened. A fully formed civilization appeared almost abruptly. There was no slow transition, no gradual buildup over tens of thousands of years like other ancient cultures. Instead, Sumer arrived with cities, governments, writing systems, mathematics, and astronomy already in place. Their major cities, Uruk, Ur, Eridu, were not small settlements slowly evolving over time. They were structured urban centers with temples, trade systems, and administrative complexity that rivaled much later civilizations. This sudden development has always raised a difficult question: how did they progress so quickly? At the core of Sumerian innovation was something deceptively simple: mud. But in their hands, mud became revolutionary. They shaped it into bricks that formed massive city structures. They used it for trade tokens, storage, and eventually, something far more important: information. From this material, they developed cuneiform, one of the earliest known writing systems in the world. By pressing wedge-shaped marks into clay tablets, the Sumerians unlocked a new ability: permanent memory outside the human mind. For the first time, knowledge could outlive individuals. These tablets recorded everything: taxes, trade agreements, laws, royal decrees, medical prescriptions, poetry, and myths. Civilization was no longer dependent on oral tradition alone. It was documented, stored, and preserved. Even more astonishing was their numerical system. The Sumerians used a base 60 structure, a mathematical framework so advanced it still survives today in modern timekeeping. We still use their system every time we measure seconds, minutes, and degrees in a circle. But as archaeologists uncovered more tablets, something unexpected emerged. Alongside simple administrative records were complex references to astronomy, ritual knowledge, and patterns that didn't seem primitive at all. Some texts described celestial movements with precision that suggests long-term astronomical observation far beyond what historians once assumed possible for that era. The question began to shift from how did they develop so fast to what exactly did they know? Grok AI unlocks the tablets and reveals hidden layers of meaning. For thousands of years, the Sumerian tablets were only partially understood. Cuneiform writing is extremely complex. A single symbol can have multiple meanings depending on context, placement, and time period. Some tablets contain hundreds or even thousands of signs. Many are damaged, fragmented, or eroded. For decades, only a small number of expert linguists could interpret them, and even then, translation was slow and incomplete. That is where artificial intelligence changed everything. Modern AI systems, including tools like Grok AI, are now being used to analyze massive collections of fragmented tablets. Instead of working line by line like traditional scholars, AI can process thousands of inscriptions at once, identifying patterns across centuries of writing styles and dialects. In research labs across Europe and the Middle East, machine learning models are reconstructing broken texts like ancient digital puzzles. Missing sections are being predicted, damaged lines restored, and previously unreadable passages decoded in hours instead of years. What was once a lifetime's work for a scholar is now happening at machine speed. And as the translations expand, new patterns are emerging. Some tablets that were previously categorized as simple economic records contain embedded astronomical observations. These include references to planetary cycles, solstices, eclipses, and long-term celestial movements that appear surprisingly precise. Even more intriguing are references that align loosely with modern astronomical concepts, including slow changes in Earth's axial tilt, something that requires long-term observation across thousands of years. Other tablets reveal medical descriptions that feel unexpectedly advanced. There are references to wound treatment, antiseptic substances, diagnostic observation of pulses, and even patterns that resemble hereditary health tracking. While not modern genetics, the idea of inherited traits appears in symbolic form. Then there are the most controversial interpretations. Certain passages describe metallic vessels, acidic liquids, and phenomena described as flow, spark, or radiance. Some researchers compare these descriptions to electrochemical reactions. This has led to speculation about whether ancient civilizations may have observed or even experimented with primitive electrical effects. One commonly cited artifact is the so-called Baghdad-type battery, discovered centuries later, which some believe could have produced a small electrical charge. Whether coincidence or connection remains debated. AI has also identified repeated references to catastrophic environmental events, burned landscapes, poisoned soil, and stones formed under extreme heat. These descriptions resemble geological formations caused by meteor impacts or intense thermal events, though the texts frame them in mythological language. The most controversial layer of interpretation involves mythological beings known as the Anunnaki. Traditionally understood as gods within Sumerian religion, these figures appear frequently in administrative, mythological, and ceremonial texts. However, some AI-assisted linguistic analysis has detected structured terminology around them that some researchers interpret as unusually technical in tone, references to engineered spaces, sealed environments, and controlled systems. Mainstream archaeology strongly rejects literal interpretations, but the density of complex language has fueled ongoing debate about whether these myths encode symbolic memories of real events or simply reflect ancient storytelling traditions. Either way, AI is revealing that the Sumerian record is far more layered than previously believed. Perhaps the most controversial aspect of the Sumerian tablets is what they say about humanity itself. Ancient texts such as the Atrahasis epic and the Eridu Genesis describe human beings not as accidental products of nature, but as deliberately created entities. In these accounts, humanity is formed from clay and a mysterious divine essence, designed to serve higher beings by performing labor. According to these stories, early divine beings grew tired of physical work and created humans to replace them. Humanity, in this narrative, was engineered for function. At first, these early humans are described as imperfect, unable to reproduce or sustain themselves effectively. Over time, they are modified until they become stable, self-replicating beings capable of sustaining civilization. Some modern interpretations, especially those influenced by alternative archaeology, point to certain phrases that AI has helped highlight, terms that resemble mixture, essence, prototype, and capacity. While mainstream scholars interpret these as metaphorical language, others argue they resemble structured experimentation. This is where speculation becomes most intense. Some theorists suggest that these myths might reflect ancient memory of biological manipulation. They point to modern genetic discoveries, such as the unusual structure of human chromosome 2, as potential echoes of deeper evolutionary complexity. However, mainstream science explains these changes through natural evolutionary processes, not external intervention. Another recurring figure in modern reinterpretations is Nibiru, a hypothetical planet proposed in fringe theories. According to these ideas, a distant celestial body influences Earth in long cycles, shaping historical events. However, there is no verified astronomical evidence supporting its existence. Still, Sumerian texts do describe cycles of destruction and renewal, massive floods, climate disruptions, and celestial omens that mark turning points in civilization. Whether these refer to real events or symbolic cosmology remains open to interpretation. What makes the AI-driven discovery so compelling is not any single claim, but the accumulation of complexity. Astronomy, mythology, medical knowledge, environmental catastrophe, symbolic creation narratives, all woven into a single ancient tradition. It raises uncomfortable questions. Were the Sumerians simply brilliant observers, interpreting their world through myth? Or are we only now beginning to understand fragments of a much deeper intellectual system that has been misread for thousands of years? Most historians remain cautious, emphasizing that ancient texts must be understood within their cultural and religious context. But at the same time, AI is expanding the amount of data available faster than human scholars can process alone. The result is a widening gap between traditional interpretation and machine-assisted reconstruction. And in that gap, uncertainty grows, because every new translation adds another layer to a civilization that already feels unusually advanced for its time. Whether the Sumerians were documenting symbolic myths, early science, or misunderstood natural phenomena, one thing is becoming clear: their story is far from fully understood. And as AI continues to decode more tablets, the line between history, myth, and interpretation may become harder than ever to define. The impossible reign of ancient kings and the mystery of the king list. There is another part of the Sumerian record that pushes the boundaries of belief even further: the ancient Sumerian king list. This document was meant to record the rulers of early civilization, listing who governed, where they ruled, and for how long. At first glance, it looks like a straightforward historical archive, but the moment you examine its earliest entries, it becomes something far more disturbing, or at least deeply confusing. The first kings on the list weren't recorded as ruling for decades or even centuries. They ruled for tens of thousands of years. One early king, Alulim, is said to have reigned for 28,800 years. Another, Dumuzid, is recorded as ruling for 36,000 years. These are not small exaggerations. They are numbers that completely break human biological reality. As the list progresses, reign lengths gradually become more reasonable, shifting from tens of thousands of years down to hundreds. Eventually, they align more closely with what we understand as human lifespans. But the inconsistency is exactly what makes the document so strange. Mainstream historians interpret these extreme numbers as symbolic. In this view, the exaggerated reigns were not meant to be literal, but were instead used to express divine authority or cultural importance. A king ruling for thousands of years simply meant he was powerful beyond measure, not immortal. However, alternative interpretations have always lingered in the background. Some researchers suggest that the list may preserve distorted memories of a time when leadership structures were not fully human as we understand them today. This is where speculation begins to intensify. Some theories propose that early rulers may have been seen as hybrids or representatives of higher beings, particularly the Anunnaki figures found throughout Sumerian mythology. While there is no physical evidence supporting this claim, the overlap between mythological language and royal lineage has fueled decades of debate. Archaeology adds another layer of complexity. In the tomb of Queen Puabi, discovered in the ancient city of Ur, archaeologists found burial remains that raised unexpected questions. Among the artifacts were skeletal remains that appeared unusual compared to typical Sumerian populations. One skull was described as naturally elongated, not the result of artificial shaping practices seen in some ancient cultures. Nearby remains included individuals of unusually tall stature, exceeding 7 feet in height, an extreme rarity in both ancient and modern populations. Mainstream science attributes these findings to natural variation, genetic outliers, or misinterpretation of burial context. However, in popular discussion, They are often linked, rightly or wrongly, to the idea that ancient Sumerian society may have included individuals who stood outside normal human variation. The truth remains uncertain, but the fascination persists because these physical anomalies appear alongside mythological claims of extraordinary beings and extended lifespans. The combination of myth, record, and archaeology creates a blurred space where interpretation becomes difficult and certainty becomes rare. One of the most persistent themes in Sumerian texts is the idea of divine lineage. Across multiple tablets, royal families are described as possessing the seed of Anu, a phrase that appears repeatedly in ceremonial and political contexts. This concept is tightly connected to rulership, suggesting that authority was not merely political, but deeply symbolic and possibly spiritual in origin. Kingship in Sumer was not simply inherited. It was justified through divine association. This idea is not unique to Sumer. Similar patterns appear across ancient civilizations. Egyptian pharaohs claimed descent from gods. Inca rulers were believed to be children of the sun. Even later religious traditions incorporate the idea of divine selection or reincarnation in leadership roles. However, Sumer may be the earliest known culture to record these ideas in written form. The challenge lies in the language itself. Sumerian is a highly context-dependent language, where single words can shift meaning dramatically depending on usage. One of the most debated examples is the term mi, which can refer to divine laws, cultural systems, abstract concepts, or even physical objects. Because of this flexibility, interpretation becomes extremely difficult. Over the years, some alternative researchers have suggested that certain Sumerian terms may describe advanced technologies or physical artifacts. These interpretations gained attention through popular writers, but many have been strongly criticized or disproven within academic circles. For example, claims that certain tablets describe detailed star maps or engineered devices have not held up under peer review. In several cases, alleged astronomical tablets were later reclassified as simple dedications or administrative texts rather than scientific documents. This highlights a key issue in Sumerian studies. Ambiguity is built into the language itself, and modern interpretation often reflects the assumptions of the interpreter more than the intent of the original text. As a result, scholars must constantly balance between literal translation and cultural context. The deeper the analysis goes, the more apparent it becomes that Sumerian writing was not designed to be read in a modern scientific sense. It was layered, symbolic, ritualistic, and deeply tied to religious worldview. And yet, even with that understanding, some passages continue to feel unusually structured, almost as if preserving fragments of knowledge that do not easily fit into simple mythological categories. Ancient warnings, cycles of collapse, and the AI pattern problem. Beyond myths of gods and kings, the Sumerian tablets also contain something far more unsettling: warnings. Not warnings in the modern sense, but recurring descriptions of cycles, repeating ages of prosperity, collapse, disaster, and renewal. Civilization rises, flourishes, and then falls, only to begin again. These cycles are not presented as isolated events, but as patterns embedded in the structure of history itself. For a long time, scholars interpreted these accounts as poetic expressions of natural disasters. Floods, droughts, and famine were seen as exaggerated storytelling tools used to explain hardship. But with modern computational analysis, a different perspective has emerged. AI systems like Grok AI, analyzing large sets of translated tablets, are beginning to identify correlations between ancient descriptions and real-world environmental events. For example, the 4.2 kilo-year drought, an event that caused widespread collapse of early civilizations, matches several Sumerian references to environmental breakdown, famine, and mass displacement. Similarly, the fall of the Akkadian Empire aligns with textual descriptions of sudden climate disruption and social fragmentation. In the tablets, these events are described in symbolic and dramatic language: red skies, darkened suns, rivers reversing course, and stars appearing to behave unnaturally. For centuries, these descriptions were dismissed as metaphor. Now, AI analysis is forcing a reconsideration of whether some of these accounts may be exaggerated but rooted in real astronomical or environmental phenomena. The implication is not that Sumerians predicted the future, but that they may have been meticulous observers of recurring environmental cycles that modern science is only now fully reconstructing. This raises an uncomfortable question: how much of ancient mythology is symbolic memory of real events? And how much has been lost in translation across millennia between myth, memory, and machine interpretation? The story emerging from Sumerian civilization is no longer simple or easy to categorize. On one side, we have a well-established archaeological framework built over more than a century of research, early city-states forming along the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, breakthroughs in agriculture that allowed permanent settlements to thrive, the invention of writing systems that made long-term record-keeping possible, and a rich body of religious mythology that reflects how ancient people understood their world. These achievements point to a civilization deeply shaped by human experience, adaptation, and creativity. On the other side, modern technology, especially AI-driven analysis systems like Grok AI, has begun uncovering something new within these ancient texts. Instead of simply translating words, AI is detecting deeper structural patterns, repeated narrative frameworks, layers of meaning that were previously difficult or impossible for human researchers to fully connect across thousands of fragmented tablets. The result is a more complex picture of Sumerian writing than ever before. The Sumerian king list, for example, challenges our assumptions about historical time itself, presenting reigns that stretch far beyond human possibility. The myths challenge how we interpret early human origin stories, blending creation, order, and divine authority in ways that resist simple explanation. The language itself challenges our ability to distinguish between literal description and symbolic expression, as single words shift meaning depending on context. Even environmental records, descriptions of floods, droughts, and celestial signs challenge how we interpret whether these accounts reflect memory, observation, or mythologized experience. Yet despite all interpretations and speculation, one fact remains unchanged. There is no physical evidence supporting claims of non-human origins, ancient advanced technology, or external intervention in the development of human civilization. What exists instead are ancient texts, fragile, omar-plete, and open to multiple layers of interpretation shaped by time, culture, and translation. Artificial intelligence has not rewritten history. What it has done is dramatically accelerate how we read it. By processing patterns at scale, tools like Grok AI are helping researchers see connections that were previously hidden, while also revealing just how much uncertainty still exists in our understanding of early civilization. Perhaps the most important discovery is not what the Sumerians definitively meant, but how much of their world we are still trying to reconstruct from incomplete fragments of language and memory. And as more tablets continue to be decoded, one question remains at the center of it all. Are we truly uncovering lost knowledge from the dawn of civilization? Or are we simply reflecting modern imagination back onto ancient words carved in clay? And that's where the mystery really leaves us. Between what the ancient Sumerians actually meant and what we're only now beginning to interpret through modern tools like Grok AI. As more tablets are decoded and more fragments come together, we may get closer to understanding one of humanity's oldest civilizations, or we may simply discover how complex our own assumptions about the past really are. If you enjoyed this deep dive into ancient mysteries, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next one. There's still a lot buried in history waiting to be uncovered, and we're just getting started.